Thank you to the Technology Advancement Center, TAC, for giving us the opportunity to talk a little bit about a subject which is near and dear to my heart, and that is the protection, both physical and cyber protection of airports around the country. We're going to spend the next hour or so talking about what the issues are, some of the challenges, some of the policy challenges we have as a country, as a preface to a conference that is going to be taking place next month in Columbia, Maryland, called Defend the Airport. And we're going to have 2 days of similar discussion and ultimately what can we do as a nation in collaboration with the federal government to improve the safety and security of our airports around the country. Thank you for those being on the call for joining us. My name is Lucia Niemeyer, and I'll be moderating this session over the next hour. A little bit of background on myself. I'm stationed in the DC area. I have had a long career in federal government first as an Air Force vet, and then working in the United States Senate, and also as the Assistant Secretary of Defense for all installations, energy, environmental programs, where I really started to focus on what we needed to do to protect our military airfields. Some of the same principles apply to civilian and commercial airports as well. More recently, I formed a nonprofit organization called buildingcybersecurity.org, and we are committed to offering airports and other commercial facility owners and operators a framework on how do you look at the cyber safety and the cybersecurity of the technologies at the airport. I just want to emphasize here that this conference, Defend the Airport, won't necessarily be about airline safety, won't necessarily be about airplane safety. We're focused on the technologies, the air traffic control systems, the nav aids, the lighting systems, and the airports themselves. Where can we enhance protections for operators as well as passengers? And that'll be the focus not just of today's session, but also of the conference next month. So we hope anybody on the call today listening in from around the country, if you're inspired to want to know more, then come on over to Columbia, Maryland. Will be I'll give a website link to Defend the Airport here in a minute, but please, there's still plenty of time to register. A couple of public service announcements before we get started. This is an interactive session, so we love Q&A, and we'll take Q&A from the audience. But I'd ask, because I'll be monitoring that, and I can only do like 1.5 things at once. So if you could just put your questions in the Q&A, not in the chat, so I don't have to toggle back and forth. That way I will be able to get to your questions, and we'll tee it up for the participants and the panelists. Another thing for a public service announcement, thank God we're doing this remotely, because I've come down with quite a hack. So if you see me go off video and off audio for just a couple of seconds, I'm not dying. I'm just basically hacking up along before I come back. So just want to making sure that we all have those I understand that I'm with you. I just need to go ahead and take care of something temporarily. All right. So without further ado, I would like to tee up our panelists. So I'll start off with Madison Strong. Madison, if you could just introduce yourself briefly. I know you're coming in from God's country there in Tulsa. A little bit about your background and how you got to be in the role there at Tulsa Airport. So over to you, Madison.
Absolutely. My name is Madison Strong. I work at Tulsa International Airport as a cybersecurity analyst here, as well as our TSA coordinator, TSA cyber coordinator. I started at the airport about 3 years ago. I started in our badging office right out of college. Worked my way up to a safety and security specialist, and then worked my way up to cybersecurity analyst. So I have a dual bachelor's degree in criminal justice and cybersecurity. I'm currently working on my master's degree. Yeah, that's about it. I'm happy to be here. So over to Eric.
Yeah, appreciate that. And Eric, over to you.
Hey, so Eric Darman, I'm the AVP for Technology Security at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. I've only been here for about 10 months, but it feels like it's been a couple of years already. So, I've been drinking from the fire hose, so to speak, and just learning all of the aviation technology, as well as, getting dug into the cybersecurity as well. I've been doing cybersecurity for about 27 years, I guess, and about 35 or so for IT overall. So I've been doing it for a minute. Most of it's been with IT vendors like Checkpoint and McAfee and a few others mixed in there. And then a couple of services organizations, and the last gig was at healthcare for a few years. So I think the highly regulated areas that I've been in have been preparing me for this role, so to speak. So anyway.
Well, I'm proud to have you both on this call, and I think you'll both be in Columbia next month, and looking forward to talking to you more in person. Hey, you in our preparation for this call and for this webinar, Eric, you lay down some pretty amazing challenges you have to deal with every day. And I just wanted to give you a few minutes to talk a little bit about, we always like to say, let's leave the audience with three things. Sometimes we tee those up in the beginning, and then we basically talk about them more. What are some of the major challenges you're dealing with, and particularly when it comes to day-to-day interaction with the federal government, all the reports you got to fill out, all the agencies you got to work with? Just give us some opening thoughts.
Yeah, so there's I guess I boiled it down to about three that I was going to mention here in the beginning, and one of those is just legacy systems. So there's a lot of stuff that's just sitting out here that I believe we have pretty well protected, but in the long run, it's definitely something that I would consider legacy and that we want to try to start getting rid of, moving along as we can anyway. And as we start doing that, then what we'll do is the real challenge has been, hey, let's upgrade the operating system, and we can't do that. So then we say, well, why not? Well, the application won't support it. Well, let's upgrade the application. Well, we can't do that because the hardware doesn't support it that it interacts with. So then we've got all these different things. It's the order of precedence, so to speak. So looking at all those, which leads into my next one, which is operational technology. So we've got We've got
Cheers.
we've got operational technology that's all over the place. Some of this stuff is really old, and some of it's not. And I think that they've done a really nice job with doing some of the isolation and protection with that. But it's still got a little ways to go. And then the last one I can think of is really threat intelligence sharing. So working through, how do I take the threat intelligence that I generate or that I receive, and can I share that with others? We've run into some limitations with that. We have FIFA coming up next year for World Cup soccer. We've got quite a few games here in Dallas, and I've been working with some of the other airports to identify, well, what are you guys doing? What intelligence are you seeing? Is FIFA giving y'all anything? Is there anything that I can help provide back? So I'll kick it over to you, Madison.
Yeah, and before I get to Madison, I know how difficult it is just to sit here in my lonely room, let alone have like a cheering section or a peanut gallery that's whispering things to you. So I can only imagine. So hopefully it won't be too much of a distraction for the next hour. So Madison, over to you.
Yeah, so it's a little bit different here at Tulsa. We're a lot smaller than DFW, obviously. A lot of things that I am seeing day to day here is still building a cybersecurity implementation plan here. So when I started in this role, we did not have one. So TSA policies, that's a struggle for us. We don't have, the big department. It's just me and our cybersecurity department to rely on. Same for us when it goes to legacy systems, I've noticed. With that being, cybersecurity is so new for us. I have noticed that a lot of our systems are out of date. And we run into the same issue when talking to third-party vendors about updating systems. It's usually because the application can't handle an update. Well, we need to find something else to do. That fully rolls into protecting OT systems for us. Everybody can say that things are air gapped. We have things segmented here, but we still run into the issue of protecting those OT systems. You have to be, as I like to say, a little unsafe to be more safe in some areas when it comes to protecting these systems. So lastly, for me, it's information sharing. With being a smaller airport, we run into information sharing as a struggle for us. We can't afford these big fancy subscriptions to these information sharing websites or forums or anything like that. I rely on a lot of face-to-face information with our community here in Tulsa, and once again, just having that connection with other airports. Very thankful for Eric. He's great at information sharing. It would be nice to see a little give from government agencies when it comes to information sharing.
Yeah, Madison, you brought up a fantastic point, which is the role of ISACs and the degree for which they're effective for you. But I want to pick up on a point real quick from Eric, and making sure the folks on the call understand. He used the term operational technologies. That's really where at least my organization, and I think we're seeing risk. It's not necessarily the software or a ransomware that takes down a booking system, or it's more that the actual technologies that are running the buildings and the operation and the air traffic controls, and where there's vulnerabilities there, and where that is really not necessarily the responsibility of the CIO or the CISO, but that kind of falls into a gap between facility operators and network engineers. And so maybe I'll open it up for as a question is, how do you bridge that gap? How do you get your network team at Tulsa or DFW to start thinking about the technologies that may not be air gapped anymore? Because as you know, we're converging a lot of the OT and the IT. How do you get them at the airport to start thinking about or working with you? And how do you collectively hit or guard those vectors of attack that may not be apparent to a CISO or to a network engineer?
Yep. I can go first on that if you don't mind, Jason. So
Yeah. For it.
when I approached, of course, I've only been here 10 months, like I said. And when I first got here, I usually take the first 90 days or so and just get a lay of the land and try to figure out if there's any gaps that I need to worry about. And honestly, when I got here, the IT side was pretty tight. I think that the OT side is just something that I'm not as familiar with. So it's definitely something that I'm trying to get there. And working with those teams, going out and visiting with them, finding out what their IT concerns are, what their OT concerns are, what do we need to start focusing on? And really just having that partnership and collaboration is key. If we don't have that, it's hard for me to know just out of the blue what I need to do in order to help protect those systems. And of course, with the cyber physical interaction, there are threat actors out there that specialize in going after those types of systems. Most of them, I would guess, are nation state actors, at least the big popular ones that I know about. So, working with those teams and just trying to identify what are your concerns because you're the expert in operational technology, not me. And then we can start saying, okay, here's from an IT perspective how I can help protect that, or maybe there's some different products or tools that we can leverage to help get data out, but not allow anything back in. So, you have to be in your control system in order to be able to affect change on the devices, but we're still able to get everything out and going into a different system where we need to protect or to retrieve the analytics, that is.
Yeah. Madison, anything to add there?
Yeah, I think for us, we don't have a lot of OT systems. So for instance, our bag belt system, before I started here, we did not have anything that kept logs on those systems, on that system for us. When I started, I realized that we don't really have a budget here, so I have to work with what I have, and I relied on CISA a lot. And I still do to this day. I enrolled us in their cyber hygiene program and their Cybersecurity program, and that's what I relied on for that log tracking and that log management on our OT system was that Cybersecurity program. And then, when it came down to, showing our leadership, we have to do more than this. It came with putting CrowdStrike on that. Well, we all know what happened with CrowdStrike. And
Yep.
so that was the first, risk mitigation question that we all talked about is what happens if something like that happens again? Well, we just were working this as a manual system. It wasn't touching anything. It was secured. It was alone. It was by itself. The system knows how to do that beforehand. If something happens like that again, then we have already practiced and will continue to practice on working with that system on a manual side. So,
Yep. So, Madison, you brought up the ISAC, the information sharing system there, information sharing system. I've heard similar critique that the aviation ISAC focuses more on airline and aviation, overall aviation safety, without necessarily talking or sharing intel on the facility side of the house, on the operations side of the house. Now, we had a brief discussion prior to this webinar about how do you solve that. And I'm not sure we can solve it by asking the aviation ISAC to expand its purview. More importantly, it's pretty expensive to join. And for smaller airports like yourself, it's just tough. It's tough to put that in your budget every year. I think, and what I had proffered up, but there might be another type of ISAC, a commercial facilities ISAC, that might give you more actionable intelligence for the facilities and the operations you run. So it's one of the things that I'm not really to ask a question, but more to see if there, and we'll discuss this more at Defend the Airport next month. Is there a more effective ISAC organization that can give you better intel that you can act on every day for your airport operations? And I think what we'll do is, I don't know if you have any comment on that. If not, we can table and we'll bring that up next month, unless Eric or Madison, you have anything you want to add on that?
Yeah, I'll add on that real quick. I know Eric has a lot of information sharing agencies that he deals with on my end. I rely a lot on the MS ISAC. I get email updates from them. I love those. And also for the state of Oklahoma, we have an Oklahoma ISAC. So if anyone out there, look within your state, see if they have anything, that has an information sharing tool like that. It took us a while to get in with Oklahoma ISAC just because they are so short staffed. But for us, we rely on them a lot for information sharing. And it's actually been very helpful. It's new to us this month. But yeah, I really enjoy that one.
And we subscribe to several as well. We've got the AISAC that we are members of, but I've also tried to get as close as I can with a lot of our federal partners. So TSA, DHS, FBI, pretty much anybody that'll talk to me and be able to provide some of that threat intelligence. And this worked out pretty well. There are a lot of mixed rules as to who I can and can't share with. So for instance, the FIFA airports that I was talking with, there's only two of them, but one of them was Canadian. I can't send them FOUO. So I have to be careful. Okay, who can I send this to? Let me think about it for a minute and then make sure that I only have US airports that I can send that information to. And then, like I said, the TSA usually provides that type of information, which is good info. CISA, on the other hand, they'll have their TLP white or TLP clear. I can pretty much provide those out because those are almost public. So those are a little bit different, but we may all be on different mailing lists. So it may not, I may get something different than Madison does, and she may get something different than I do. So having some sort of interesting platform that we would be able to do some of this sharing with, I think would be very helpful. So,
Yep. So a couple things real quick. I've got great questions coming in from Nick and Tina. Thank you for those. But I really wanted to jump on something, Eric, that you brought up earlier as far as nation state threats. And we did talk about this also in the pre-call. And that is, some of the cybersecurity concerns you have are not within the fence line at DFW, but are outside the fence line. Particularly with what we've seen, and actually what the Chinese even admitted recently, that they have been embedding malware, Volt Typhoon, Salt Typhoon. Hopefully for those on the call today, those are tuned by now familiar terms. But they've been embedding Chinese malware specifically to disrupt our power, our water, our comm, and fueling systems, and in order to deny us the ability to move predominantly defense materials. And I'll get to that, why that matters to Madison here in a minute. But you do worry about, whether the power will stay on, whether the water, will still be good. And this is mainly for Eric, but please, Madison, chime in. What is your relationship, and how do you work with your local utility providers to try to see what they have for cyber protections and the degree for which you can mitigate risk for operations being shut down at DFW?
So at this point, I haven't been working with local utilities just yet. Now, what we've done, though, to have some resilience with it is, of course, we've got multiple redundant power coming in, different directions, different entry points into the airport. Similar for water, we do have our own what is it called? It's not wastewater treatment, it is gray water treatment. So we go through and we use that type of water for irrigation and things like that. And then, of course, we have our central utility plant. So we do have some of those capabilities built in. Whenever I do get some of the water alerts, for instance, I'll get it over to our water facilities folks and just say, is there anything that we need to worry about? Are you okay with this? And then have them look at it, and we'll kind of have a discussion on it. I think in Texas, we've had 2 of those alerts so far that the state of Texas has sent out.
Yeah.
But as far as working with them, that's not something that I've been able to do in my short tenure just yet, but definitely on the list.
Yeah. The reason why I asked in Madison, I'll give you a chance to respond. You're unique airport because you actually have a military function at your airport too. And that's specifically what nation states are saying, that they want to go after the mobility assets. Actually, there was a great report put out by FDD, which is the offshoot of the Solarium Commission, which is a national commission carried out by Congress a few years ago to build a series of recommendations on how to enhance cybersecurity for our nation. And that organization, FTD, just put out a report about the commercial and military airports and ensuring we still have a resilient mobility system to be able to deploy systems. And you're front and center on that, Madison, right now, with having a guard unit there at Tulsa. Can you talk a little bit about the interaction you have with the guard and trying to get after some of those concerns about sharing information, but more importantly, ensuring, I think the Tulsa Guard still has F-16s, I believe, and being able to make sure that they're protected. So Madison, over to you.
So we do share an airfield with the Oklahoma Air National Guard here. And it's great. Our information sharing is great between both of us. We have no problem with that. When it comes to cyber stuff, it's a little bit iffy just because, some things are more sensitive than others. I'm happy to share things with them. I know that there's legality, hoops that we have to jump through when it comes to information sharing. But right now, as a whole, a lot of what we're working on with one another and conversations I've got to sit down on is our UAS detection systems. So I got the okay to talk a little bit about that, but our Air National Guard does have a UAS detection system. We're currently working on a joint agreement between the both of us when it comes to when they can tell us if there is any UASs in the area, and then, mitigating that issue. So that's one thing we're currently working on. When it comes to other things, a lot of stuff is kind of separated. For us, we just share the airfield. So we just have to make sure that our airfield lighting is secure and steady. It's working when it is, and we're responding to them in a timely manner if they also see anything.
So I want to make sure for folks on the call, she ran through that pretty quickly. UAS is unmanned aerial systems. And that is a very big issue right now for the country. For those of you who may have seen headlines about these mysterious UASs up and down the East Coast, no one knows what they really are. But there is a real concern, particularly as you look at nation states on battlefields overseas, using UASs to knock down aircraft, to knock down other UASs, to knock down helicopters, and it's a huge issue, at least on the military side of airfield management. And I do want to emphasize for this conference next month. There'll be military airports and civilian airports coming together to talk about common problems, and counter UAS is a big one. And so yeah, I appreciate that very much, Madison, wanting to work with the Tulsa Guard to protect those F-16s, because that's exactly where you're going to see targeting UASs to knock out military capabilities before they can even get anywhere. Eric, I don't want to put you too much on the spot. But as far as the large airports, how are they looking at the UAS threat? And if it's outside your lane, please let me know.
No, it's significant. We have had some instances where it's just enthusiasts that happen to be flying their drones and they think that that's kind of neat to get close to the airplanes and close to the air traffic, and that's not a great idea. As we've seen, those can do a lot of damage, and we don't want any kind of significant commercial event, right? I would prefer not to ever have that while I'm working at the airport. And, we do have our own capabilities that we're exploring ourselves. But, the interesting part is, since we do have our own police department, what do we do with that? Is it really illegal for them to fly in the area of our airspace? And I don't believe that there are any laws on the books right now that we can go and specifically arrest someone for flying a UAS over Class B airspace. So until that happens, we're kind of to that point of, hey, go away and, don't come back. Otherwise, we're going to tell you to go away again. So, we do need some regulations or some laws on the books to help with that type of thing, I believe.
Yeah, I would love for both you and Madison to bring that next month because you are going to have FAA there. I 100% agree. I think as a nation, we need to look at degree for which we protect our airspace in and around major airports. And yeah, that could get really controversial when you start going into communities and saying there's certain things you can't do. But I don't see us having a choice. I think at some point somebody's going to want to do something bad to an airplane or to a, to shut down an airfield, and that's a very easy way to do that.
Yeah.
One system operating over an airfield, you're grounded. You're not doing anything until you can deconflict that safety concern. So I agree with you, Eric, 100%. I think that's a huge area where we need either state, local, or even national policy on how do we protect the airspace around all types of airports, small, medium, and large. So I appreciate you bringing that up. Madison, I mean, what's your perspective on that? Whether Oklahoma has any laws on that as far as monitoring or operating UASs or UAVs in and around Tulsa Airport? Are you tracking that as well?
I am our operations director, Cole Brown. I know he is tracking it as well. He handles that stuff a lot. We have a drone program here, so he's all about it. But as of right now, as far as I know, Oklahoma does not have any laws or regulations against flying drones in our airspace. But I do know that with the Air National Guard, once we get them involved and there's that memorandum between both of us, it kind of changes the game for us because they are allowed to. If it's over their lease space, they are allowed to make sure the drone is no longer functioning. And once that memorandum happens between us, we'll have a five mile span, I think, around our airport that allows them to handle that for us, along with we have a police department here as well. It allows them to go out and, like Eric said, there's no laws or regulations about you know arresting somebody for that as far as I know. But it would be nice to see Congress kind of open up and take note from a conversation like this, as we need something like that. I mean,
Well,
it's our concern is the same with Eric, is the passengers. I mean,
yep.
what happens if one of
Yep.
those get ingested into any aircraft? It could be detrimental for the
Yeah,
aviation
and that's exactly why we're bringing this group together to defend the airport. It's both a cyber defense as well as a physical defense, and we'll have officials from the Transportation Security Agency and the FAA there. So that's intended. That's our intent, is to have this discussion, to capture these key challenges and concerns, and to be able to come back in a year and say, okay, here's what we've done to solve them. So that's the intent of what we're trying to do next month, and appreciate bringing up this issue. I'm going to challenge you both with a question from the audience, but if you can't answer it, I can. I'll give it to you both first. It comes in from Tina, and I very much appreciate getting this question. What priorities should smaller general aviation airports focus on most regarding cybersecurity?
So I'll take this one real quick, Eric, if you don't
Well,
mind.
yeah.
So we do have a smaller general aviation airport here. It's Tulsa Riverside. Um, we handle all of their network security. We handle all that stuff for them. So for them, and our concern is the same thing as a bigger airport. We're still making sure that they're protected in every way that they can be. So that's really all I have on my end, if Eric has anything else.
We have corporate aviation, but we don't really have a general aviation, I would guess. It's really focused on corporate and some of the bigger names in the Dallas area. But some of the GAs, the focus that I've seen on protecting some of my assets should be similar, even if it's on a smaller scale there. So, the automated pumping or automated pump systems on the fuel system, on the fuel tank farms, those have had some problems. I think there were about 3 or 4 vendors of those that had some compromises. So there's an ability, if those are attached to a network or the internet, for people to be able to compromise those and perhaps affect some sort of damage in that manner. Would they be able to turn it on and just let fuel flow, or would they be able to just prevent fuel from flowing? And then, just if you have a website, obviously you want to make sure that that's not necessarily attached to anything internally. What kind of accounting systems do you use, or is it mostly SaaS, or do you have a lot of internal things? Now, I would suspect that moving to a SaaS platform or to a cloud-based platform with that shared responsibility model would be a wise option. I don't know if it's in the cards necessarily for cost. They should be similar, I would think, as far as costing goes for an on-prem solution, but your mileage may vary. And a lot of these are included too. If you happen to have an Office subscription, for instance, you get Defender for Endpoint included. You get some of the other capabilities included. Now, is it the best solution? That's open for debate. There's a lot of people that have a lot of opinions on that. So, is it, should you look at something else? Maybe. It just depends on what your cost options are really, and how many licenses you need.
So if you don't mind, I'm going to flip from being moderator to being a panelist, and I'll give you also my input. So Tina, this is going direct to you. When I first saw the question, it is tough for smaller airports to understand, okay, where do I get started? So first of all, what I want to do is direct you, Tina, to, and I'll put the website on in the chat. Is the nonprofit that I run has a free checklist that anybody that has a facility can use. And you can download it and you can start asking questions based on that. And it's 16-step checklist. You can determine, okay, where do I truly have risk? The first couple items in the checklist is going to be an inventory. In other words, am I connected or am I not? In other words, do I even know the connected technologies that Eric mentioned in the pump hydrant system, or in the access control systems? Are they even connected? Do I even have microchips in them, or is it just are they old school 40-year legacy systems you don't have to worry about? So that's the first thing: is to what degree do I rely on connected technologies for the operations of my facilities and my assets. And in a perfect case in point is the pipelines and the pump systems for the hydrants on the airfield. That's the first place I would look. So I would do an inventory first. Second thing is I would do a risk assessment. Okay, what happens if one of those systems is exploited? How much of a bad day is it for me? And if it turns out it's really not that important, it's not critical to airfield operations, I got to tell you, I'd put my budget money somewhere else. But if it turns out it's critical to the operation of your airport, small, large, or medium, I definitely would say, okay, next step is what can I do to mitigate risk in that system? And there's two things that I would highly recommend for you, Tina. First of all, get rid of default passwords. All right. All these OT systems, whether it be an HVAC, whether it be access control, they all have password access. Get rid of default passwords. And don't just tape the new passwords up in the control center. And it was implement a program here where you're actually, focused on multi-factor authentication. There was more than one person or more than one way to access a system. The second thing I would do other than passwords is a lot of these systems, and this goes to your home as well, have remote access. In other words, I guess I just had an HVAC system installed in my home and I can operate it off my phone. I'm like, no way, absolutely not. I'm not doing remote access. So a lot of airfield systems, just by the nature of efficiency, have implemented remote access for some of the critical systems. So a third-party vendor, a third-party service provider can just, look at their phone, see where there's potentially an issue. You have to be careful about that. You have to understand that every remote access that's open is also a vector of attack to get to the overall network or any kind of system. I want to draw attention, and this is going to go directly to a question from Nick in the chat, which I'll get to that in a minute. The connection between IT and OT. If those of you on the call remember, Target department store about 10 years ago had a major breach of data from the credit card users for Target as well as other customer data. It started in an HVAC system in one store by a third-party service provider putting in a USB port to do a maintenance check, activated a malware that transmitted itself from that HVAC system to that store's network and ultimately up to corporate Target. And I could give you at least another examples that would take up much more than the time we have in the webinar. But bottom line is that there is a connectedness, Nick, between IT and OT that is becoming more converged. And I know Madison brought up firewalls and air gaps. We've got to move away from those because they're not effective. When you think your OT is protected by a firewall and air gap, sophisticated actors can jump those firewalls, and now you're not even watching what's happening in your OT. So our recommendation, our nonprofit, is you eventually got to converge. You should ensure whatever network lockdown that was mentioned earlier by Eric is extended to the OT as well. And that to us is part of the checklist we put out. But the goal here is you can reduce 70% of the risk just by passwords, MFA, and locking down or securing remote access. And that makes it harder for a bad actor. And we talk nation states, but it can be anybody that wants to shut down an airport for a ransom. You can only imagine stealing data or shut down the reservation system. Okay, that's a pretty good ransom. Shutting down an airport because now you've gone after the safety controls, the fire controls, the air traffic controls, the lighting. Okay, that shuts down the airport. That's a much bigger ransom. So the goal here is how do you mitigate risk from ever having to deal with a existential safety risk to that airport. So hopefully Tina, I gave you a little bit more in there as far as how you should get going on the journey. And I'll go ahead when Eric and Madison are talking as long as I am. I'll go ahead and throw the website on the chat as well. So I'm not sure anything, Madison or Eric, to go ahead and follow up on that.
No, you did have one good point on there, and I was trying to think of the name of it, and I came up with automatic tank gauge. That's what it was that I kept seeing the threats for here recently. But it was risk-based assessments, and we've just talked about that with my risk team on Friday. About, does it make sense to spend $20,000 to solve a problem when it's only going to be a $5,000 loss, or it's minimal. You don't want to spend more on the cure than what the loss is expected to be. So coming up with those estimates is a little difficult most of the time. But if you do happen to have cybersecurity insurance, you can go ask your carriers or your broker a lot of times and just say, hey, what are the probability of this, and what are the top threats that I need to look out for? And then you would be able to take that, and it does help justify adding budget, of course. Just in case you need to have some extra budget, of course, which all of us do. But I think the risk-based assessment is really good, and that was a good call out, Lucian.
Yeah, Madison, anything to add there?
No, I think you hit it all perfectly.
Yeah, I just noticed that. Just realized from my our TAC team that me putting something in the chat doesn't make it out to the entire audience. So we'll have to figure out how to solve that one. But in the meantime, for those of you who are interested in more, it's buildingcybersecurity.org. It's free. It's a great way to get started on a journey is understanding where your risk is. And that to me, look, if you've got 60-year-old systems, you don't have a risk because of the fact that nothing's connected to the internet. It's really for those modern airports, particularly as we look at multi-million-dollar renovations or upgrades where we're putting in connected technologies in order to enhance the user experience, to reduce operating costs, to increase our sustainability goals. That's really where you start running into a risk where you need to go to mitigate that risk with some type of protection. So. And we'll talk more about that at Defend the Airport next month as well. One thing I do want to point out for the conference next month, it's a lot of folks are being attracted, Eric and Madison, to not just the speakers, and there'll be some good content, but there'll be actual exploits. In other words, there'll be teams coming in from around the country who can show, okay, here's how we can hack into an airport. Now that's pretty scary for me. And I'm not sure, I want to know that information, but for those who are interested to see, okay, where do they have vulnerable systems? There's a whole other part to this conference or this event. One is information sharing, one is coming up with good ideas, but there's a whole other track on raising awareness of where there are vulnerabilities in airfield systems. So I just want to make sure for those on the call, it's going to be you're not just going to sit in a room. You're going to get a chance to go and see things and then ultimately work on ways to mitigate that risk.
Yeah, that was one of the things that interested me in the conference too, Lucian, was just that you have those types of simulations sitting there that people are going to be able to use to practice with. So I think that's a cool capability.
Yeah. So moving on, you brought up, Eric, a fantastic point about all the people you have to interact with. And then Madison, you brought up your real support from CISA Sentry. And then so there's a good story there and a not a good story. So let's start with the not good story. And And Eric, moving forward, if you're a king for a day, I mean, how do we resolve the fact that you've got all these organizations and all these folks you've got to report to about what's going on? What would you recommend coming into next month as far as, how do we get after that? It's what would make it more effective?
So I think one thing that I have found a little frustrating, and I found it frustrating in healthcare also, just because there's multiple agencies you have to report to, very specific time periods. And the other challenge, of course, with healthcare was I was in multiple states, so every state has their own privacy regulations that you had to worry about. Now I only have to worry about Texas, but I have Texas, state of Texas, we have CISA, TSA, DHS, and there were two or three others that I had listed out that I have very specific contacts with, much less those that I happen to have contracts with, and contractually I'm obligated to let them know if we have something that either affects their data or it's just in general, hey, we've had an issue, I have to let you know. So there's just focusing on the state and federal, though, if you do have some sort of event, there's a lot of people that you have to start calling. And for me, I can at least either take it myself and let my folks take care of working the issue, or I can have somebody do it. And I do have aviation security that I work with very closely with these cases that helps me with the TSA contacts and the CISA contacts. And we do have an advantage. I will admit that we do have folks on site. So, if we needed to, we can always just go over to our integrated operations center and sit with some of the TSA folks and say, this is what's going on. Need to give you a brief. Who do we need to get involved? Now, the challenge is, how do you go about timing that? And can I just say, hey, everybody that's interested, here's the time I'm going to talk to you, because we have real world problems to deal with. It's not, let me sit on the phone all day and recite the same story over and over for all
Yep,
of them.
that's a problem. Yep.
And, if you do have an incident, telling you that, hey, just send us an email with the information is probably not the way I'm going to be contacting you on it. So, we've had instances where we've tried to do the right thing, and I'm just not going to send it in clear text email. So, there are certain limitations to how we should be asked to provide the data. If it's not an incident, if it's just, hey, we're informing you of something suspicious, then I'm not going to go fill out an incidents form, because that has a whole new connotation of, I have inspectors coming out to talk to me, I have other things going on. So
Yeah.
it would be really good if we had a one-stop shop, IC3, something like that, like the FBI has set up, that could then get in contact with others that need to be involved with it. The one throat to choke. I don't see that happening, but I will
We can
say
get
that
there.
our TSA and FBI reps are excellent. They're very understanding of, let me know when you can talk, and then we'll talk, and working around my schedule for things and my team's schedule. So making sure I actually have something interesting to report is one key thing, instead of just getting on for 30 minutes and BSing with people saying nothing to report. Oh, well, what about this? What about that? We talked about it, right?
Yep.
So I think that it would be really nice in my dream world to have it where I'm not saying I don't want to report. What I'm saying is, let's find a single way to do this that's a little less cumbersome and a little less bureaucratic, I think.
Yeah, I think we need to make that a goal. Our plan is to capture some of the good ideas from the defend the airport session and actually package them up and send them in a letter over to the FAA and TSA. So I think we have to include that as one of the items that, so we can send it and have DHS look at it, because they own FBI, they own CISA, and they own, and they own some other organizations that can help out. I think that would be a great recommendation. So we got to make sure we capture that, Eric, when you're in town next month. Madison, you brought up a government program that actually is useful to you, and I know that's sometimes rare. But can you offer to some of the smaller airports and GA airports around, and where can Sentry help you out? CISA's Sentry program, a little bit of maybe 2 minutes of background of how you use Sentry, and what should others be looking for?
I tell SZA all the time that if I could be their poster girl for how much I love their Cybersecurity program, I would. So when I first started in this role, SZA actually reached out to us and said, hey, you guys are considered state local government because of your airport size. Here is a list of products that we can offer you for free. And Cybersecurity was one of them. And it's OT, IT, network monitoring. They monitor everything. They have a whole stack in our server room that monitors all incoming and outgoing traffic for us. It's wonderful. We have a contract with them that states that if we do have an incident here, or if we need any type of assistance, we can reach out to them any time of day, and they'll be there for us. So I actually have one of their analysts on hand 24/7. We have a Teams chat together. If I see something roll across any of our softwares that we use for network monitoring or anything like that, I can shoot him over a message and say, hey, can you look this up for me? This is what I'm seeing. He does it immediately, and it's great. It's pure open communication. If we get quarterly reports from them, their analysts will call us and ask us questions. Hey, we might be seeing something, or can you give us more information on an IP address for you guys? And yeah, it's wonderful. I rely on them more than anything. So, as being the only person in this department, all their products that they have a cyber hygiene program that does web filter monitoring. And we take advantage of all their products. So, if you're state, local government entity, I cannot suggest Sysmore for any of their free products.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure for those who may not know, and by the way, I think you just exposed something I missed. We were going through what do GA airports need to do. They need to get to know their CISA rep and their local FBI rep, and they need to get to know them before there's an incident. So there's a constant feedback loop. So we keep referring to CISA. I just want to make sure we're clear for folks on the call. That's an organization, agency within the Department of Homeland Security. They call themselves, it's a Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency. Try saying that 10 times in a row. But they were set up specifically to be a clearinghouse for capabilities for the private sector in some cases, or state and local, I'm sorry, for the state and local. And I'm glad, Madison, you mentioned it, because they are a great source for those who don't have the budget but want the free tools. And just by having airports around the country adopt Sentry, you're mitigating risk. So I just wanted to say thank you for bringing that up, and thanks for the strong support. We are trying to get CISA reps to the conference next month. They're in a process right now of going through some leadership changes, but we're hoping some of that will be sorted out by June. And so I'm hoping you'll have a chance, Madison, to personally thank some of the folks who are running the Sentry program at headquarters CISA. And I know they appreciate that feedback, that there's somebody that loves them, that's getting good stuff out of it. We need more of those stories. More importantly, we need that to spread around the rest of the country, so other airports can go ahead and take advantage of their services. Now, granted they're free, and some of the large airports need to be doing a lot more than that. But for the smaller airports, it's a great place to start, and then you build from that as you move on to your own investments. So I appreciate that. So while we were talking, I got jumped on by the TAC staff that I have to bring up, that the Technology Advancement Council has a bevy of resources to include OT boot camps, operational technology boot camps, that are also offered outside the conference time or the event time. So at any time that anybody wants to be able to get smarter on OT, you can reach out to TAC, and they have a website. They can talk to you about what they offer for training. I don't know if it's free. I'm sure I'm going to get something in the chat that gives me an idea of that in a minute. But still, I just wanted to make sure that for the both of you who will be at Columbia, Maryland at the TAC headquarters, you'll see some of those other capabilities that might be good for you and your staff to partake of later on. Okay, so we're coming down to the last 10 minutes, and before I stun you with my last question, which is, what's the one thing that you would really like to fix? And I'll save that for like the lightning round in the last couple of minutes. There's a couple of questions that came in. One of them, I'm not sure you guys are gonna have an answer for. Tyler, I think, is getting pretty good with details here. So I'm going to throw it out there, and if it turns out we can't answer it today, we'll make sure we answer it and have it answered by the conference time. Have you found any effective defenses for ADS-8 spoofing? Has that come across either one of yours? Go ahead, then, Eric.
Yeah, GPS spoofing anyway. So we don't have any. It depends on how you call it defense. So I'm going to define defense as detection in this case, and not necessarily the ability to prevent it from happening. But knowing that it's happening is a good defense anyway. So we are in the process of deploying some anti-spoofing, anti-jamming capabilities. One of the interesting things that I learned at one of the conferences I've been to recently was it's not necessarily just nation states. It could just be car thieves or truck drivers that don't want to be detected from the satellites that are monitoring them. So where else are you going to find a lot of cars? The airport. So we have seen some instances of this occasionally at DFW. This technology should give us the ability to kind of pinpoint what's going on and find out at least the area that it is happening, and hopefully be able to provide some awareness to the FAA on, hey, there's something going on. Maybe you should let the pilots know. The jamming doesn't bother me so much. Pilots should know how to fly the airplane without having, the GPS coordinates. They've got other instruments in the cockpit. The spoofing is a little concerning to me though. So that should be self-evident for that one. But it is something that we're interested in. We've been working with MITRE and the U.S. Air Force on that with the tri-chairs. So
Yeah. Anything, Madison, to add to that?
I don't. I requested information from the Air Guard on jamming and spoofing, and I didn't get a whole lot back. So hopefully by the conference time I will.
Yeah, absolutely. And more importantly, I think it's also great. You're going to have a lot of military leaders there that are running the military airports. My guess is there'll be an opportunity to share information between the two groups. That's the reason why how we set this up to be both a civilian airport and a military airport event is to be able to learn from each other and figure out, okay, how do we address these issues? Because look, a bad actor is going to be looking to any airport that's vulnerable, not just a military one, so or a large one. So appreciate that. And Eric, thank you so much for being able to answer that question. I had a feeling it might be a little bit too technical, but I do appreciate that it is an issue that we're having to take a look at. So I did get a note from TAC that the OT boot camps are not free. So we'll have to figure out exactly what that cost is and have it offered up as a capability when we see each other next month. All right, so I'm not seeing any more questions from the chat. There was a question about airworthiness of aircraft, but as we said in the beginning, we're focused more on the airport for this conference and for this webinar, and more importantly for the event coming up next month. Aircraft safety is a huge issue. And there is a lot of folks working on that, particularly with the automated systems we have, not just in our aircraft, but also in our cars. I mean, there's a growing risk we have when we automate within aircraft and transportation systems, we create more risk. That's a huge topic. Not sure we can cover that today. And I will be honest, I think we're going to focus more on the airport next month, defending the airport itself and not necessarily the aircraft. But Eve, I do appreciate your interest. I would reach out to the Aviation ISAC to see what they're working on when it comes to aircraft safety and certifications. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to you guys for some final comments. Madison, I'm going to start with you. If anything you want to leave the audience, and more importantly, looking forward to seeing you next month. So any last comments?
No, I'm just excited to see what the conference brings. I appreciate everybody jumping on the call and hearing what we have to say. And yeah, I look forward to seeing everyone.
All right, Eric.
yeah, I'd echo that. I'm looking forward to it as well. And like I said, this is I guess the inaugural Defend the Airport conference also. So I'm excited about that, and just being able to see all the different stuff out there. One thing I would mention though is anything that even the smaller airports can do to increase your cybersecurity awareness, even if it's not going defense, is going to improve your posture. If you can increase the cost against a cost to the threat actors, they'll just move on to something else. They're looking for easy and they want something fast. They don't want to sit there and have to mess with it. The difference there is, of course, the nation state actors, which are paid entirely to get a particular objective. So, I would doubt that a lot of that has to do with smaller airports. It may not at this point. They may be going after pretty much any target of opportunity. But again, anything you can do to even generate some awareness with it. And one thing, since Madison is big on CISA, that I do use all the time is their emails about, hey, there's a new CISA-KEV edition, which is the known exploitable vulnerabilities list. So anything that's on that means that it's a vulnerability in the wild that already has an exploit built for it and that is currently being attacked. So those are definitely things you want to look at in order to patch those and get those taken care of. So kind of on that checklist, I'm sure that's on there too, Lucian, that you guys have published. But I think I'm looking forward to meeting everybody live.
Yeah, and then I'll go ahead and close out here. Just a couple comments. First of all, Eric and Madison, you represent a couple. I mean, obviously, DFW, one of the largest in the country, but Madison, you represent that target that yes, nation states will be going after, and that is defense critical infrastructure to include those airports that are co-located with military assets. So having you on this webinar has been absolutely essential because it's not just the large airports. It's going to be the ones that will directly impact our military capability. And Tulsa's got some pretty good assets there sitting right there by the civilian airfield. So I appreciate your opportunity and your desire to want to get on the webinar today. I'll just leave with my dream for next month, and that is we come away from that 2 days with a hard-hitting list of things that are coming in from the airport, of recommendations are coming in from the airports around the country to how do we push public policy to be more effective and be more efficient. We didn't talk much about grants, which was another huge opportunity here. Airport only grants. We'll talk about that in next month, where there might be new grant opportunities for airports to directly pull federal, state, or local resources and to mitigate the risk at the airport. That's a huge subject and one that I think is going to be discussed more in the halls of Congress. And we want to make sure we have recommendations that can drive efficiency and effectiveness of those programs. So I'm hoping that everybody will attend next month from all over the country. And then we'll be able to drive change. So in a year from now, Eric, when we do Defend the Airport 2, we'll actually have progress in where we've made as far as solving problems, not just talking about them, but actually solving some of the problems and really truly mitigating risk. So like you mentioned, the bad actors go somewhere else. They don't see a real juicy target. They decide to move on. So that's our plan. I want to thank you both so much. The hour flew by, believe it or not. We were at an hour. And I just want to appreciate your honesty and your support and everybody who was able to stay on through the whole hour. Thank you. I think we got to all the questions, but I did put my contact information into the chat if anybody else wants to reach out and find out more, but we're working on. If not, we'll see everybody next month in Columbia, Maryland. Thank you so much.